Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, December 5th, 2024. Secret Service Acting Director Ronald Rowe promises reform and accountability in testimony at the final meeting of the House Task Force on the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. He also, at one point, gets into a very heated exchange with Republican Congressman Pat Fallon of Texas, with Rowe accusing the congressman of politicizing the 9/11 terror attacks. House Ethics Committee meets for a second time to decide whether to release its report on former Republican Congressman and former Attorney General nominee Matt Gaetz. President-elect Donald Trump's Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth speaks to reporters about misconduct allegations he's facing. Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, co-leaders of President-elect Donald Trump's Department of Government Efficiency, meet with House and Senate Republicans on Capitol Hill. Veterans Department officials testify on the department's budget shortfall. And the Justice Department concludes Memphis' police department uses excessive force and discriminates against African Americans. That and more coming up on Washington Today. Story from Politico. Acting Secret Service Director Ronald Rowe Jr. used an hours-long appearance before House lawmakers to outline sweeping changes the agency is making after its failure, in quotes, during the attempted assassinations of Donald Trump. The Thursday hearing is the second and final public meeting by a bipartisan House task force that is investigating the attempted assassination at a Pennsylvania rally in July, as well as a second attempt in Florida. In addition to the hearing, the panel also voted on Thursday to release its final report detailing its findings and recommendations. Reporting from Politico. Here's part of Acting Secret Service Director Ronald Rowe's opening statement.
The mission assurance inquiry identified failures by multiple employees that warrant disciplinary action. The quality of the advance work and preparation for the Butler Farm Show visit absolutely did not meet the expected standards of this agency. Let me be clear. There will be accountability, and that accountability is occurring. It is an extensive review that requires time to ensure due process. And the pace of this process, quite frankly, it does frustrate me. But it is essential that we recognize the gravity of our failure. I personally carry the weight of knowing that we almost lost a protectee, and our failure cost a father and husband his life. I have reflected extensively on the agency's substandard performance during the advance for the Butler rally. I have implemented numerous systemic and strategic changes to prevent these failures from ever happening again. It has been my singular focus to bring much-needed reform to the Secret Service, to be an agent of change, to challenge previous assumptions, and while doing so, also ensuring that the brave men and women of the Secret Service have the resources, leadership, and assets that they need to be successful in carrying out our protective mission. A full list of actions is itemized in my prepared testimony, but these changes have included providing the highest levels of Secret Service protection to President-elect Trump throughout the remainder of the presidential campaign, expanding the use of unmanned aerial systems for aerial observation at venues, expanding the use of counter-unmanned aerial systems technologies to mitigate the use of a UAS as a kinetic attack vector, expanding the use of ballistic countermeasures at Secret Service protected campaign sites, a directive to mandate unified command in a singular location for all protective sites, something that was not done on July 13th in Butler.
The Acting Secret Service Director Ronald Rowe testifying before the final House Task Force on the attempted assassination of Donald Trump meeting today. Returning to the Politico article about this meeting, tensions briefly boiled over between Congressman Pat Fallon, Republican of Texas, and Rowe as Fallon used a photo of a 9/11 remembrance event to ask Rowe about his role at the event. Fallon accused him of putting other Secret Service agents out of their usual positions so he could be more visible at the event, an accusation Rowe denied, saying security wasn't impacted. He is visible in the photo of the event standing near President Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and congressional leaders. That was from the Politico article. Here's what it sounded like at the hearing.
You recognize this photo?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. Was that the remembrance of September 11th?
It was.
Was it in New York?
It was at Ground Zero.
Okay. who's usually at an event like this closest to the President of the United States, security-wise?
The sack of the detail.
Special agent in charge of the detail. Were you the special agent in charge of the detail that day?
Actually, let me address this. Could you please, staff, leave that? Oh, no, leave that one up with the circle around me. Thank you. So actually, Congressman, what you're not seeing is the sack of the detail out of the picture's view. And that is the day where we remember the more than 3,000 people that have died on 9/11. I actually responded to Ground Zero. I was there going through the ashes of the World Trade Center. I was there at Fresh Kills.
I'm not asking you that.
I was
I'm asking
there,
you
Congressman.
Were you the special agent in charge?
To show respect
You were not.
for a Secret Service member that died on 9/11.
You were trying to be.
Do not invoke 9/11 for political purposes.
I'm not. I'm invoking this.
You are, sir.
Gentlemen,
And you are out of line.
I would like to ask him a question.
Please.
You are out of line, Congressman.
Don't try to
Way
bully
out of
me. I am an elected member of Congress, and I'm asking you a serious question, and you are playing politics.
I am a public servant who has served this nation, and
you won't answer the question.
On our country's darkest day.
Committee will come to order. Committee will come to order.
I'm asking you serious questions for the American people, and they're very simple. They're not trick questions. Were you the special agent in charge that day?
No, I wasn't. I was there representing the United States Secret Service, sir.
Mr. Fallon, your time's expired.
And did not affect protective operations.
You know why you were there? Because you wanted to be visible, because you are auditioning for this job.
I was there to pay respect for a fallen member of this agency.
You endangered
You are
President
out of
Biden's
line,
life,
Congressman.
Vice President Harris's life, because you put those agents out of position.
Mr.
Did you have a radio with you?
Mr. Fallon, your time has expired.
Did you have a weapon?
Mr.
I did, sir, and you are out of line.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Please.
All right. And we are back in order now. We are back in order now.
Thank you. Exchange between Congressman Pat Fallon, Republican of Texas, and witness acting Secret Service Director Ronald Rowe at today's House Trump Attempted Assassination Task Force hearing. After the hearing, Task Force ranking Democrat Jason Crow of Colorado spoke to reporters about what you just heard.
Member Crow, during your final remarks, you said this is one of the best hearings that you've been a part of. You highlighted the professionalism and seriousness of the members. How does an exchange of yelling between a member of this committee and Acting Director Rowe about the politicization of 9/11 affect that perception to the American public?
Well, there are exuberances that occur when people get emotional about emotional issues, and this is an emotional issue, right? There's a lot at stake. There always is a lot at stake. Acting Director Rowe was a first responder on 9/11, and as a combat veteran myself, I understand that there's a lot you carry with you throughout the rest of your life when you encounter a situation like that. So, I understand those exuberances and that emotion. The bottom line is this report is comprehensive and thorough, and it was a bipartisan process. And this hearing was a remarkable show of professionalism and bipartisanship, and America should understand that.
Congressman Jason Crow, Democrat from Colorado, ranking member on the House Task Force on the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. The task force has 7 Republicans, 6 Democrats, today voting unanimously to submit their final report on the assassination attempts, plural, to the full House with findings about what went wrong and recommended legislative reform to keep it from happening again. From ABC News, Pete Hegseth, President-elect Donald Trump's pick for defense secretary, was back on Capitol Hill on Thursday to meet with Republican lawmakers as misconduct allegations continued to cloud his selection to lead the Pentagon. Behind the scenes, Trump's political team is focused on figuring out where female Republican senators stand on Hegseth, according to 2 people involved in the conversations. Trump's advisors are fully aware that with such a thin GOP Senate majority, Hegseth's fate could all come down to the women in the conference. But Trump himself has not been working the phones for Hegseth, as he did for Matt Gaetz, his original pick for Attorney General, who withdrew his name from consideration amid sexual assault allegations. That was from ABC News. Pete Hegseth spoke to reporters in a Senate office building between the meetings.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to relay that it has been a great week. It's been a great day. Great day yesterday on the Hill meeting with senators, earning every vote. I have a great deal of respect for this process. Advice and counsel have gotten great advice. We don't take anything for granted. The conversations have been robust, candid at times, with great questions on policy, personality, everything. So we're going to earn those votes. We're fighting all the way through the tape. We're grateful to have the president's support because his vision for this Department of Defense is to bring it back to its core capacity of deterring our enemies and, if necessary, defeating those enemies. And that means ultimately putting war fighting at the middle of what the Pentagon does. No more social justice, politically correct approaches to how we fight and conduct wars. This is about lethality, meritocracy, readiness, war fighting, and accountability. And I'm grateful that President Trump has bestowed this opportunity on me. This process has been a very good one, despite all the noise on the outside. Had a great interview with Megyn Kelly yesterday, and will continue to answer questions specifically to senators, who are the ones that deserve answers to every question they have. And in every office we've stood in, we've welcomed that opportunity. It has been a great week. It's a process that's ongoing, and we look forward to finishing it.
Will you support the release? Will you support the release of that whistleblower report for the concern?
It's very interesting what the press likes to dub a whistleblower report, which some others might clarify as a email from a disgruntled employee. One might say.
So would you support the release of that?
Do you think
committee?
convinced Joni
pressed you
Ernst?
on the issue of alcohol?
No, we've had great conversations about who I am and what I believe, and frankly, the man I am today, because of my faith in my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and my incredible wife, Jenny, right here. I'm a different man than I was years ago, and that's a redemption story that I think a lot of Americans appreciate, and I know from fellow vets that I've spent time with, they resonate with that as well. You fight, you go do tough things in tough places on behalf of your country, and sometimes that changes you a little bit. And by the grace of God and my Lord and Savior, I had an opportunity to come on up out of it and do great things with great veterans organizations that fought for vets, that fought for reform at the VA and for war fighters, and at the Fox News Channel to advocate for those very same causes. And I'm proud of what I fought for. I'm not going to back down from them one bit. I will answer all of these senators' questions, but this will not be a process tried in the media. I don't answer to anyone in this group, none of you, not to that camera at all. I answer to President Trump, who received 76 million votes on behalf and a mandate for change. I answer to the 100 senators who are part of this process and those in the committee. And I answer to my Lord and Savior and my wife and my family. I'm proud to be here. And as long as Donald Trump wants me in this fight, I'm going to be standing right here in this fight, fighting to bring our Pentagon back to what it needs to be.
What have your
conversations
on Fox with
Thank you. Have a good weekend, guys.
Pete Hegseth, President-elect Donald Trump's nominee for Defense Secretary, with reporters in a Senate office building as he continues his one-on-one meetings with senators. Associated Press writes that Matt Gaetz may be done with the House of Representatives, but his former colleagues aren't through with him yet. Lawmakers on Thursday are expected to decide the fate of the long-awaited House ethics report into sexual misconduct allegations against Gaetz, with many pressing for its release, even though the Florida Republican has left Congress and withdrawn as President-elect Donald Trump's nominee for Attorney General. Gaetz denies the allegations. Bipartisan committee planned to vote in the afternoon on whether to make public the findings of their years-long inquiry. If they decide against the disclosure, Democrats are poised to force votes on the House floor requiring the committee to publish the full report. That was the article from Associated Press earlier in the day. Later in the day, House Ethics Committee putting out a statement. The committee met today to discuss the matter of Representative Matt Gaetz. The committee is continuing to discuss the matter. There will be no further statements other than in accordance with committee and House rules. Tesla CEO Elon Musk and biotech entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, the leaders of the new advisory group called Department of Government Efficiency, were on Capitol Hill today meeting with Senate and House Republicans. President-elect Donald Trump says that DOGE, as it is known, will work outside government to dismantle bureaucracy, slash excess regulations, cut wasteful spending, and restructure federal agencies. House Speaker Mike Johnson spoke to reporters as the co-leaders were heading into the meeting with the House Republicans.
We're all excited. I know you're all excited that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy have joined us today. This is an important day. It's the beginning of a journey. You've heard what DOGE is all about, the Department of Government Efficiency. It's a new thing, and this is a new day in Washington and a new day in America. We have long lamented the size and scope of the government, that it has grown too large. And let me be frank about this. Government is too big, it does too many things, and it does almost nothing well. And the taxpayers deserve better. They deserve a more responsive government, a more efficient government, one that is leaner and more focused on its primary objectives. And that's the opportunity that we have here now. We believe it's an historic moment for the country, and these two gentlemen are going to help navigate through this exciting new day. Elon and Vivek don't need much of an introduction here in Congress for certain, and most of the American people know what they're capable of and what they've achieved. Both of these gentlemen have run very successful organizations. They're innovators, and they're forward thinkers. And so that's what we need right now. And so what you're going to have today is, first is a meeting that we'll have here with decision makers, key figures in the Republican House and Senate, who are chairs of committees of jurisdiction who deal with the money and financing of government and the structure of government. We'll have chairs of the new DOGE caucuses that have been set up in the Senate and the House. And then after that, we'll proceed to the Congressional Auditorium, where all of the Senate Republicans and House Republicans have been invited, and I think many of them will gather for this discussion. So there won't be a lot of detail for the press today, and that's by design, because this is a brainstorming session. It is the first, again, as I said, of a long series of meetings that will be held as we're laying the groundwork for the new year and the new Congress. And you're going to see a lot of change around here and in Washington and the way things are run. We need to make government more efficient, and that is what this whole objective is. It's what the DOGE effort will be about, and you're going to see a bicameral cooperation, and it will be, by the way, bipartisan. Over the last 24, 48 hours, you've seen a number of our Democrat colleagues, both in the Senate and the House, who have said, you know what, sign me up. I want to be a part of this as well. So we welcome that. It should be a bipartisan effort, and I think we're going to do great things for the country.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, with reporters on Capitol Hill. The Des Moines Register has an article. U.S. Senator Joni Ernst is proposing to move federal agency headquarters out of Washington, D.C., sell off unused real estate, and enact sweeping changes to telework policies that emphasize tracking remote workers' productivity. She's set to make the recommendations Thursday during her first meeting as head of the Senate's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, caucus. A reporter asked Speaker Johnson about federal employee telework.
Some labor unions are already fighting back. They've already signed contracts to try and get this, that they could be able to work from home, things like that. Your reaction to that?
Well, there was a report that came out today. I don't know if you all have seen it, but someone did a little survey of how many federal employees are actually working in the office. By one estimate, it may be about 1% if you don't count the security personnel that are covering these buildings. That is absurd, and it's not something the American people would stand for. And so one of the first things that I think you'll see is a demand from the new administration and from all of us in Congress that federal workers return to their desks and get back to the work that they're supposed to be doing. I think that is common sense. What you're going to see here, the overriding theme here, is a return to common sense and a return to accountability and efficiency in government. I think that's going to serve the people well.
House Speaker Mike Johnson on Capitol Hill as the DOGE co-leaders, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, were walking in for the closed-door meeting with House Republican members. A congressional DOGE caucus in the House is being led by Aaron Bean, Republican of Florida, and Pete Sessions, Republican of Texas, and it's got its first Democratic member, Jared Moskowitz of Florida. He was on Fox News on Wednesday explaining why he joined.
So why, sir, is this an idea, a Republican idea, that you're on board with?
Well, I mean, look, a broken clock can be right twice a day. But in all seriousness, I mean, does anyone think government is perfect? Is there any American who's like, hey, government's perfect, don't touch it? No, obviously there are ways we can make government more efficient. There's ways we can save money. The Pentagon hasn't passed an audit in 7 years. And I think the Department of Homeland Security has become too big. You're seeing issues within FEMA and Secret Service, and I think a lot of that has to do with the giant bureaucracy that's over there. And so this is a conversation that's going to happen with or without Democrats at the table. I think Democrats should go have that conversation. What are we afraid of? We shouldn't just run to a safe space. No, we should run in the room and have this argument. There's going to be disagreements. I'm not going there because I'm going to agree with every idea that they have. But where there is agreement, I think the American people expect us to try to make the American government more efficient and save taxpayer money.
Let me ask you more.
Congressman Jared Moskowitz, Democrat of Florida, on Fox News on Wednesday. The House Veterans Affairs Committee held a hearing today on VA's request for additional money, but not as much as they previously thought they needed. A Federal News Network article from last week reads, the Department of Veterans Affairs is cutting its request for additional funding by almost half after officials told lawmakers that a shortfall in its health care budget wasn't as severe as earlier estimates showed. The VA is now asking Congress for a $6.6 billion supplement to its fiscal 2025 budget to keep providing more health care to more veterans than ever before. That was from Federal News Network. Congressman Mike Bost, Republican of Illinois, the Veterans Committee chair, told the witnesses, all officials from the VA, today they need to improve their accounting.
VA's budget's been growing for a long time, and we dealt with it, and we've dealt with shortfalls. But the budget's never been this screwed up as far as what Congress sees, okay? We haven't had people come to us and ask us for large amounts of money, and oh my gosh, the sky is falling, then just to give the large amount of money, and then all of a sudden, no, we really didn't need that. You've got to understand that your credibility is shot, and that we've got to have a better system of being able told, we as members of Congress, I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican, our job is not only to pass legislation, it's also to make sure that we provide you with the money to operate this system that is vitally important to those people who need it most and that we're obligated to pay. But we can't do that unless you have competent people that actually get it right. And not coming to us, all of a sudden, we made sure before we left here on the break that we passed the 2.88. Had to do it. By golly, our veterans won't get paid. We do, and then all of a sudden we get a letter that comes back, we got almost $6 billion in that. That is a miss. I agree with the ranking member in his opening statement that, we're going to take care of our veterans. He and I agree on that. But he also, I think the idea of just handing you money with not oversight, this is the problem. We have to get this straightened out, and the only way we get it straightened out is that your agency actually gives us accurate numbers on time. We've got to have it. That oversight, because I'm going to tell you, every one of those people that you serve, that have wore the uniform, and the families that sacrificed, you know what? They pay taxes too. So it's a double-edged sword.
Congressman Mike Bost, Republican of Illinois, Veterans Affairs Committee chair at today's hearing. Committee ranking Democrat is Mark Takano of California. He asked one of the witnesses, VA Undersecretary for Health, Sharif Elmahal, about the need for the additional money.
I know my colleagues have a lot of questions about what VHA is not able to accomplish under its current budget. And we know that important projects like infrastructure improvement have been put off for years. We know that we have buildings that date back to World War II or before. But focusing on fiscal year 2025, what will happen if Congress does not address the $6.6 billion shortfall right now before we recess for the holidays? I'm concerned about these tight belt-tightening measures that cannot continue indefinitely, nor are they good for veterans' care in the long term. Would you agree?
I would, Mr. Ranking Member. The picture is essentially one where we're seeing demand continue to go up from veterans across the country. We're continuing our outreach. The bipartisan PACT Act has made the doors into our healthcare system much wider, and that's a good thing. We have evidence that says we are doing everything from reducing the risk of suicide to providing some of the highest quality care in the country. And so that is reason alone to have expanded eligibility into the system. That continues. We're enrolling more vets. Vets are relying on us more. Our reliance went from 41 to 45% this past fiscal year. We estimate that every additional percent costs about $2.6 billion. These are folks who are already enrolled, who then choose to use us for healthcare. We think all of that is a good thing, but it has costs. And so we need the money now to build capacity to be able to make sure there's a doctor, there's a clinician at the other end when all of these new veterans enroll. That's the primary reason to do this. You're mentioning infrastructure. Every 2 days on average, Mr. Ranking Member, we've had an infrastructure failure in the VA that has caused disruption in care to veterans, either the closure of a clinic or the need to move patients in a hospital. Our infrastructure situation is very serious, and we would appreciate consideration of that. That's separate from the $6.6 billion that will cover our operational needs and costs into the fiscal year, but we hope that Congress will consider major and minor construction as well.
Veterans Affairs Undersecretary for Health Sharif Elnahal questioned by Congressman Mark Takano, Democrat of California, ranking member on the Veterans Affairs Committee, at today's hearing. President Joe Biden requested $369 billion for the VA for fiscal year 2025, 10% more than 2024. Story from the Military Times. Veterans Affairs officials on Thursday unveiled plans to expand caregiver support services to thousands more families in coming years, while also easing program rules to minimize disruptions for families already receiving those benefits. The Postal Service budget was the subject of another hearing today with the Postmaster General, Louis DeJoy, and it was the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. The Postal Service recently said it lost $9.5 billion in fiscal year 2024, $3 billion more than the previous year. Senator Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, the committee's ranking member, asked the Postmaster General about labor costs.
If you compare a contractor or a contracted employee to a government employee, an insourced employee, and you compare the health costs and the pension costs, they're dramatically higher for insourced. So by increasing your number of people who work for the government as opposed to contractors, you're compounding the same problem. You were here with us 3 years ago saying we can't handle all these other expenses. We need to shift them somewhere else. And so the reform package did that. But in contrast, then you could continue to hire more people instead of saying, well, we have all these extra costs associated with government labor. Why don't we hire labor outside of the government and use contractors?
So in isolation on one element of the issue, which you seem to be focused on, perhaps you're right, okay? But I've come out of industry. I've been on boards. I've built an organization in this similar space with 20,000 people, worked in an organization with 100,000 people, okay, and have walked into a situation that had varying activities going on inefficiently across its operation.
But I would argue you would have treated your own business differently. I have not converted 140,000 people to full-time. Your business was successful, though, not by doing the decisions you're making now. This wouldn't have helped the private businesses.
I have to make decisions within the environment I have. If I change a collection box time on a blue box, I have the rage of Congress bearing down on me. Okay, so there are trade-offs that one has to make in this step. At the end of the day, we have requirements to have about 20% of our workforce be pre-career, 80% of our workforce
You're delivering less mail. You need a smaller organization, not a bigger
We're actually growing in the package business. The objective here is to create an integrated mail and package network. An integrated mail and package network means less places, less contracted places, less of our own places, and putting people.
It's hard to point towards success when the debt last year was $6.5 billion and this year's $9.5 billion. That doesn't look like success under any sort of metric. That looks like it's getting worse. And the reason why labor is an important part of this is it's estimated that the labor is 80% of the cost of doing business for the post office. For UPS, which is unionized, but a private union versus a government union, it's about 50%. For FedEx, who's non-unionized, the cost of labor to the business is about 38%. So there are cost savings by being outside of government unions, frankly. Even private unions have some cost savings.
Senator Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, ranking member on the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, questioning the witness, Postmaster General Louis DeJoy. Story from AP. The U.S. Postal Service said Monday nearly 100% of completed mail ballots were returned to election offices within a week for this year's presidential contest, despite hurricanes, some misdirected election mail, and delivery concerns raised by state officials. The Postmaster General said postal workers processed more than 99 million general election ballots, making extra deliveries and collections and working to identify problems that could lead to incorrect deliveries. That was from AP. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Are you a nonfiction book lover looking for a new podcast? This holiday season, try listening to one of the many podcasts C-SPAN has to offer. On Q&A, you'll listen to interesting interviews with people and authors writing books on history and subjects that matter. Learn something new on Book Notes Plus through conversations with nonfiction authors and historians. Afterwards brings together best-selling nonfiction authors with influential interviewers for wide-ranging, hour-long conversations. And on About Books, we talk about the business of books with news and interviews about the publishing industry and nonfiction authors. Find all of our podcasts by downloading the free C-SPAN Now app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. A few more headlines from AP. French President Emmanuel Macron vowed Thursday to stay in office until the end of his term, due in 2027, and announced that he will name a new prime minister within days following the resignation of ousted Prime Minister Michel Barnier. Macron came out fighting a day after a historic no-confidence vote at the National Assembly left France without a functioning government. He laid blame at the door of his opponent on the far right for bringing down Barnier's government. And NASA announced more delays in sending astronauts back to the moon more than 50 years after Apollo. Administrator Bill Nelson said the next mission in the Artemis program, sending 4 astronauts around the moon and back, is now targeted for April 2026. It had been on the books for September 2025 after slipping from this year. The U.S. House today debated a bill that the Republican sponsors say will reduce unnecessary and burdensome regulations that small businesses face. It's titled the Prove It Act. Congresswoman Harriet Hageman, Republican of Wyoming, started the floor debate.
It is no secret that small businesses around the United States face an uphill battle when complying with federal regulations. Many regulations cause significant economic impact on these small businesses. When small businesses are forced to shoulder the burden of these regulations, it results in higher prices at the cash register. It also can keep some small businesses out of the market altogether. Rather than face a mountain of regulation and compliance costs, some would-be small business owners may never achieve their dream of opening a small business. Under the Regulatory Flexibility Act, the agencies that make these damaging regulations are supposed to take small businesses into account when writing the rules. All too often, however, the agencies are out of compliance with the RFA's mandates. One report actually found that in 75% of the rulemakings, the agencies either ignored costs on small businesses or underestimated the regulations costs. H.R. 7198, the Prove It Act of 2024, would strengthen the RFA's already existing provisions and make it so that agencies have a much harder time skirting their statutory obligations to our country's small businesses. The Prove It Act of 2024 allows small businesses to petition the Small Business Administration to investigate a rulemaking process when a small business owner believes the agency inadequately performed its regulatory analysis as required by the RFA. It also authorizes the SBA's Chief Advocacy Council to independently investigate a rulemaking agency's compliance with the RFA. Finally, it creates a penalty for rulemaking agencies that fail to comply with the RFA's requirements.
Congresswoman Harriet Hageman, Republican from Wyoming, on the House floor. Congresswoman Erica Lee Carter, Democrat from Texas, spoke against the bill.
I rise in opposition to H.R. 7198, the Prove It Act of 2024, a bill that would vest the Chief Counsel of the Office of Advocacy within the Small Business Administration, which has been chronically underfunded, and which I wish we were spending time on that instead of this bill. It would invest it with enormous and unreviewable authority over agency rules. More specifically, H.R. 7198 authorizes the Chief Counsel unilaterally and without review to exempt large parts of the business community from proposed rules if he or she determines that an agency did not properly consider how a proposed rule could affect small entities. In doing so, this bill would empower large companies and undermine the regulatory process that keeps Americans safe by imposing a series of requirements on regulatory agencies. As we all know, regulatory agencies play a critical role in our safety and well-being by writing rules designed to protect our food supply, environment, physical infrastructure, and more. These regulations safeguard the freedoms that all Americans enjoy. While efforts to ease burdens on small businesses can be useful, they should not prevent regulators from doing their jobs in the public interest. The Prove It Act, under the guise of helping all small businesses, would actually allow an unelected administrator within the SBA to circumvent congressional and agency intent with little oversight. It is simply unacceptable that we would task a single official in the SBA with unilateral and unreviewable authority to suspend new and existing protections and safeguards for large swaths of the economy. Not to mention that it would also require agencies to jump through new, vaguely defined and untransparent bureaucratic hoops, which would cause delays and uncertainty, all the while doing nothing to actually help small businesses.
Congresswoman Erica Lee Carter, Democrat from Texas. The House passed this bill by a vote of 208 to 196, sending it to the Senate. It was mostly party line, 2 Democrats joining the Republicans in voting yes. The Senate Health Committee today held a hearing with FDA Commissioner Robert Califf about the high levels of obesity and diabetes in the United States. Committee Chair Senator Bernie Sanders, independent from Vermont, asked him about whether the FDA will push for tougher front-of-package nutrition labeling rules. Senator Sanders held up a bottle of Coca-Cola to make his point.
Are you going to tell us with a straight face that you have come before this committee and the American people and say, hey, we have a major crisis. We are losing lives. We're spending huge amounts of money. People's limbs are being amputated. We have got to act. And have you pointed a finger at those people who are the cause of the problem? Have you had the courage to take on a very powerful food and beverage industry? You know, there are 15 teaspoons of sugar in this product. How many parents in America know this when they give it to their kids? Say, here, have a Coke, go out and play ball. Have you done your job and your predecessors, not just you, have you done your job in alerting the American people to the danger and rallying members of Congress to stand up to the special interests who are causing these problems?
With all due respect, I've been working on this problem for all of my career. This is what I've done, and I think I have talked about this very specifically. I think we all wish that we had gotten to the goal sooner that you described. I'm not contesting that. But I do believe in an appropriate discourse with this committee. We need to carefully reflect on the issues in play right now that would allow this to happen. And I'm really heartened to hear the bipartisan support for this, because much of what we try to do, frankly, gets blocked along the way. And we'll talk about that.
Let's be honest here. The food and beverage industry spends hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars on lobbying and on campaign contributions. You tell me the role that they are playing in destroying the health of America's children.
Well, I'm not going to contest your comment about the amount of money spent on lobbying. I think it's probably accurate. I don't have figures on that. But a lot of the changes that those of us who are interested in better health would like to make are blocked at the level of legislation for reasons that
but I'm
you'd have to
still
tell
not
me.
hearing you. What is the reason that our kids are unhealthy? What role do this industry play? Even now, you're getting out of office. Are you prepared to tell us that this committee, this Congress needs to take on the food and beverage industry whose greed is destroying the health of millions of people?
Well, I'm not going to castigate the people that work in the food and beverage industry.
You're not.
No, what I
That
will
is
say-
your job.
No, it's not to castigate. It's to point out how to make progress in this area. We have an industry that if you tried to change it overnight, there are farmers all over the United States who would not be able to grow the crops they're currently growing. So there needs to be a plan, and it needs to be implemented in a mature, thoughtful way across the country.
FDA Commissioner Robert Califf, questioned by Senator Bernie Sanders, independent from Vermont and chair of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee holding today's hearing. A Washington Examiner article on the hearing reads, the Food and Drug Administration is expected to announce a decision in the next few weeks on whether to revoke approval for the artificial food color red dye number 3, which has been the subject of hot debate for decades due to its carcinogenic properties. Red 3 was banned for cosmetic use and topical drugs in 1990 for its known links to cancer, but has not been removed from ingestible products. Story from the Washington Examiner. Wall Street today, the Dow down 248, NASDAQ down 34, S&P down 11. A scathing report from the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, writes CNN, found the Memphis Police Department engages in a pattern of discriminatory policing, including violence against the disabled, and regularly violates the constitutional rights of its residents, particularly black people. Historically similar reports by the feds have led to the overhaul of local police departments with federal monitoring agreements known as consent decrees. However, in a letter responding to the DOJ's claims, the city of Memphis said it is not ready to accept the findings, and the police chief said her department has made hundreds of changes in recent years to improve officer response. That's from CNN. Kristen Clark, Assistant U.S. Attorney General for Civil Rights, held a news conference today in Memphis.
Based on a comprehensive investigation of the city of Memphis and the Memphis Police Department, the Justice Department has found a pattern or practice of conduct that violates people's civil and constitutional rights. Our investigative team includes career attorneys and staff from the Civil Rights Division and the U.S. Attorney's Office, and more than a dozen experts who specialize in police department management, use of force, statistics, and other areas. This investigation was comprehensive and exhaustive. We interviewed dozens of police department officers and many city employees, as well as hundreds of community members and local organizations. We reviewed hundreds of incidents, watched hundreds of body-worn camera videos, read thousands of documents, and conducted statistical analyses of police data regarding officer activities and enforcement. Based on this investigation, we found that the police in Memphis use excessive force, that they stop, search, and arrest people unlawfully, that their policies have a discriminatory effect on Black people, and that they discriminate against people with behavioral health disabilities. Furthermore, we are also concerned that MPD officers unnecessarily escalate encounters with some of the most vulnerable members of this community, its children. Many dedicated police officers in Memphis regularly risk their lives to keep people safe and to protect their rights. The practices I described, however, violate the Constitution and federal law. They harm and demean people, and they promote distrust, undermining the fundamental safety mission of a police department. The city and police department can and must correct these issues.
Kristen Clark, Assistant U.S. Attorney General for Civil Rights, today in Memphis. The Justice Department's investigation was launched after the beating death of Tyree Nichols after a traffic stop in 2023. The Memphis mayor, Paul Young, and police chief C.J. Davis issued statements today, both saying they are taking the DOJ's findings seriously and will review this lengthy report with an open mind, but that they don't plan to enter yet into any agreement in principle or consent decree with the Justice Department at this time. From Mayor Young's statement, he writes, "This decision stems from the belief that together we can enact more effective and meaningful changes through community engagement and collaboration rather than through a long-term federal consent decree that may become a hindrance to our improvement efforts and a financial burden to our residents." And from Police Chief Davis, the DOJ's investigation has been largely conducted with little transparency regarding their findings. We will continue to work with national police reform experts and the DOJ to produce a plan that can be implemented effectively and efficiently without federal constraint and undue financial burden to the residents of Memphis. This is Washington Today. The Pentagon says that 3 American service members are being evaluated for traumatic brain injury, TBI, suffered during operations conducted in Syria earlier this week. A Jerusalem Post article reads, the U.S. forces deployed to Syria to support the Syrian Democratic Forces' fight against ISIS are now finding themselves at flashpoints near the Euphrates River as fighting escalates in Syria. Pentagon Press Secretary Pat Ryder took questions about this at today's news conference.
You mentioned the 3 service members being evaluated for TBIs. Who is responsible for that attack? Who did the U.S. military target on Tuesday?
Yeah, again, as I highlighted on Tuesday, I mean, that's something that we're still assessing. It's, again, important to highlight that region has been the so first of all, we know that Iranian-backed militia groups operate in that area. We also know that Syrian regime forces operate in that area. But this location has been used in the past by groups like Iranian-backed militias to target U.S. forces at MSS Euphrates. But again, in terms of who is operating those vehicles or who is firing those rockets and mortars, that is something that, as I understand it, CENTCOM is still assessing.
True, but you did mention a T-64 tank last time. Isn't that normally something that's used by the Syrians or the Russians, not Iranian militia groups?
Entirely possible, Carl. Again, as I just highlighted, I mean, we do know that there are Syrian regime forces in that area, but in terms of at that moment and who is doing what, that's something that, again, as I understand it, CENTCOM's still looking at. So.
Okay.
The Pentagon Press Secretary Pat Ryder, an Air Force Major General, at his news conference today at the Pentagon. Story from Reuters: Syrian rebels captured the city of Hama on Thursday, a major victory in a week-old lightning advance across northern Syria and a devastating new blow to President Bashar al-Assad and his Russian and Iranian allies. That was from Reuters. State Department Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel addressed this at his news conference.
Situation obviously is changing quite rapidly. Yeah. The city of Hama has fallen to the Islamist rebels. I know you gave your explanation the other days about what you want to see about a political process, etc. I mean, but what's the level of concern right now? Is there concern that this is getting out of hand, that the humanitarian consequences and the political consequences could be further reaching?
So that is certainly, the humanitarian impact is certainly one that is front of mind as we see these events unfold, and we, with our partners, are urging allies to protect its civilians, including members of minority groups. And again, I think, not to sound like a broken record of what I said the other day, but I don't have specific assessments on individual battlefield updates, Sean, but all of those together just continue to reflect, in our point of view, that the time is now to return to a serious UN-facilitated political process. And the constant refusal to engage in this process, candidly, has led to directly some of the events that we're witnessing. And some of these escalatory events over the past 72 hours demonstrate that the only way to truly end this conflict once and for all is through inclusive political settlement consistent with UNSCR 2254.
Just pursuing a couple points. Iran, of course, is allied with Assad and has said that it's willing to consider sending more troops in. Obviously, the U.S. is critical of Iranian involvement. What's your take on that? I mean, is there a sense that there needs to be prevention of Damascus falling even? What's your assessment of a greater Iranian role?
Well, look, this goes back to what we've long said, that we think the Iranian regime has been and continues to be one of the largest exporters of terrorism and instability since 1979. We want to see Iran stop its destabilizing activities inside Syria and in the broader region writ large, full stop. And we think key to that, at least in the context of Syria, is a UN-facilitated process that is consistent with UNSCR 2254.
State Department spokesperson Vedant Patel at his news conference at the State Department in Washington. And one more story from the Middle East. The New York Times writes that Amnesty International on Thursday became the first major international human rights organization to accuse Israel of carrying out genocide in Gaza, drawing a rebuke from Israeli officials who denied the claim. Amnesty's contention, outlined in a 296-page report, comes as the International Court of Justice, the principal court of the United Nations, is reviewing similar allegations by South Africa, claims that have been at the heart of difficult debates about the war around the world. Reporting from the New York Times. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter Word for Word and get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. You can sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.